Welcome to our deep dive into atomic habits. We are going to be looking at this book by James Clear and really trying to get to the bottom of how to build better habits,
Yeah,
right? Um, it's about these small changes that he says lead to these remarkable results.
that's what's so interesting about it. It's not about like a big overnight success. It's just these small, consistent improvements that you make and how they build on each other.
Yeah, there's that idea that if you can get 1% better every day for a whole year, you end up like 37 times better,
Right.
which is insane. It really highlights how time really magnifies the effects of those, even the smallest actions.
Yeah, and that's why he really emphasizes that valley of disappointment, which happens early on, when you're putting in the work, but you just don't really see results.
Right.
You get discouraged, but then, if you keep going, you hit that plateau of latent potential where all of that consistent effort just suddenly becomes visible.
Like it's those bamboo trees,
Yeah.
that take years to grow underground before they just shoot up seemingly overnight.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if I've given up on some things too early.
Yeah, I think we all have. It's a really common thing. I think we overestimate the importance of these single events and then underestimate the power of just the consistent daily actions, which is why he really focuses on like the systems first mentality over the goals first mentality.
Okay, so how does that work, a systems first mentality? I mean, goals are still important,
Oh,
right?
for sure. But think about it like this goals are like where you want to go, like the destination.
Okay, yeah.
And systems are like the roadmap and the vehicle to get there.
I like that.
Yeah. So like focusing on the system means you're focusing more on the process, like the
Yeah.
daily habits and the routines.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately leads to the results.
So instead of just saying, I want to lose weight,
Mm-hmm.
I would create a system around that goal,
Mm-hmm.
like meal planning
Right.
or working out and finding an accountability buddy.
Exactly. And like a good system makes it so that you're not having to rely on willpower all the time. It makes it more like an automatic thing.
Makes sense. And thinking about the systems instead of the outcomes probably
Yeah.
takes a lot of pressure off too.
It really does. Yeah. Because if you're only thinking about the goal, like happiness becomes conditional.
So it's like, I'll be happy when.
Exactly. Like when I get this, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
But with the system, you're more focused on like enjoying the journey.
That's something that I struggle with. I always think about what's next instead of just enjoying the process.
Right. And then something else Claire talks about that's super interesting is that our habits actually shape our identity and vice versa.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's not just doing the habit, it's becoming the type of person who would do that habit.
Precisely. So like if you want to write a book, it would be more effective to focus on becoming a writer. Someone who writes consistently rather than just saying, I want to finish this book.
Oh.
What kind of person do you think those daily writing habits would create?
That's interesting. I guess it would probably make me more disciplined and more observant,
Yeah.
and then probably more confident in expressing myself.
See, that's the power of that. It's not just changing your actions. You're changing how you see yourself, your beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of.
So to change our habits, we have to change our identity. But how do we actually do that?
Well, to understand how to change them, I think we have to understand like the mechanisms behind them.
Right.
And Clear kind of breaks this down into what he calls the habit loop, which is like a 4-stage process that drives our behavior.
Okay. Let's break down the habit loop. So what is the first stage?
So the first stage is the cue, which is basically like a trigger that signals your brain to initiate that behavior.
Okay, so like a real world example, let's say you're trying to build the habit of going on a walk every morning. What would be a cue for that?
So the cue could be something like setting your walking shoes by the door the night before,
Yeah.
or setting an alarm on your phone.
Okay, so the cue is like a little nudge to get things going.
Exactly. And then the second stage is what he calls the craving.
Okay.
And this is like the motivational force behind the habit.
So in this case, the craving would be that desire to get some fresh air, move your body, maybe clear your head.
Exactly. It's that anticipation or that desire that motivates you to act. So then the third stage is the response, which is the actual habit that you perform.
So that would be putting on my shoes and going for the walk.
Right, exactly. And then the final stage is the reward, which is that satisfying outcome that reinforces the habit.
Okay, so in this case, the reward might be that feeling of accomplishment after the walk, like that endorphin rush, or maybe you saw some beautiful scenery.
Right, exactly. And it's that reward that makes you want to repeat the behavior in the future.
So understanding this habit loop is important because it gives us a framework for changing our behavior.
Yeah.
We can sort of manipulate each stage to make good habits more appealing and bad habits less so.
Right. And for example, he talks about how important it is to make the cues for good habits obvious and attractive. We already kind of touched on that by putting your walking shoes by the door.
Right, yeah.
That visual cue is like a constant reminder.
And to make it more appealing, maybe you could lay out your workout clothes next to your shoes.
Yeah.
Or put a note on the mirror that says, go for a walk.
Yeah. Those are great ideas. It's all about making those good habits as easy and inviting as possible.
That makes me think about my morning routine.
Mm.
I wonder if I should start putting my journal and my favorite pen out on my desk the night before, instead of keeping them tucked away.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. By making the cue more obvious, you're more likely to sit down and write.
Yeah. It's like setting myself up for success before I'm even awake. Okay, so we talked about cues. What about the other stages of the loop? Like, how can we use those to our advantage?
Well, with the craving, you can make it more intense by like highlighting the benefits of the good habit.
Okay.
So with the morning walk, you could remind yourself, you know what, I'm going to have more energy throughout the whole day if I get a little exercise in the morning.
Yeah, and to make the response easier,
Ugh.
I could pick a walking route that's close to home and pretty flat.
Right, exactly. You want to remove any barriers that might make you think twice about it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the reward. So we've talked about like the intrinsic rewards of walking, but you could also add an external reward, especially when you're just starting out.
Yeah, like listening to my favorite podcast while I walk or treating myself to like a smoothie afterward.
Exactly. It's just about finding those ways to make it enjoyable so that you're more likely to stick with it.
I like that. It's almost like we're becoming like habit engineers.
Right.
We're designing our own behavior by manipulating these 4 stages of the loop.
Exactly. The more we understand how those mechanisms work, the more control we have over our habits and ultimately our lives.
Speaking of control, Clear also talks about the power of environment design, right?
Yeah.
He even has an equation for it. He says, behavior equals F of person and environment. What does that even mean?
So that's Lewin's equation. And it's basically saying that our surroundings really influence our actions.
Okay.
Like who we are and where we are both contribute to how we behave.
So even if I have good intentions, if my environment is bad, it could just sabotage my efforts.
Think about it like this. If your goal is to eat healthy, but your pantry is full of junk food, you're constantly going to be fighting that temptation.
Yeah, it's like an uphill battle.
Exactly. But if
Yeah.
you design your environment so it supports your habits, it becomes so much easier.
So it's making good habits the path of least resistance.
Exactly. And there's a really fascinating example he gives about a hospital cafeteria.
Okay.
So they were trying to get people to choose like the healthier options.
Right.
So they just rearranged the food.
Oh, wow. Just rearranging the food made a difference.
They just put water in like more accessible locations than the sugary drinks.
Mhm.
And they put the fruit at eye level, and then the less healthy snacks they kind of tucked away.
It's amazing how much just like rearranging stuff can influence people's choices. I know I'm guilty of just grabbing whatever is closest.
Right. Our brains are wired for efficiency, and that's why it's so important to be intentional about your environment.
Yeah, that's true. It's like playing chess with ourselves, setting up the board to make sure we make the right moves.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of making things appealing, let's talk about dopamine and how it fits into all of this.
Here's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Isn't dopamine the feel-good chemical?
It is, yeah, but it's not all about pleasure. It's more about motivation and desire.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's released in anticipation of a reward, and that's what drives us to seek out those experiences.
Oh, okay. So it's like
Yeah.
the fuel for our habits.
Exactly. And Clear brings up this great example, the Polgar sisters.
Those are the sisters whose dad basically trained them to become chess masters, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He thought genius could be developed. So he completely engineered their environment so that chess would be the most rewarding and attractive thing.
So how do you do that?
So the house was just full of chess books, They would have these chess tournaments at home. Their social life pretty much revolved around chess. He basically made chess like the most stimulating thing in their world.
And it worked. They all became world-class chess players.
It's amazing, right? Just shows how powerful environment and dopamine can be when you combine them.
Right. So how can we use this knowledge to make the habits that we want more appealing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of us aren't trying to create chess champions.
Well, you can make any habit more attractive if you associate it with positive feelings or if you make it fun. Think about the activities that you naturally gravitate towards. What makes those so engaging?
That's a good question. I guess for me, it's the activities that are challenging, but not too overwhelming.
Yeah.
and like the ones that give me a sense of accomplishment and maybe connect me with other people.
Yeah, those are all great elements that we can like use and build into our own habit building. And then there's another powerful force that shapes our habits that we haven't really touched on, social influence.
Right, because we are social creatures. Like, we want to belong and fit in with everyone else.
Exactly. And Clear points out that we're most susceptible to imitating the habits of the people that are close to us, and then those who are many, like the general public, and then those in power.
So our friends and family, the norms of society, and then anyone that we see as having a certain status.
It's like this invisible force that shapes our behavior. Think about how many habits you've picked up from your friends, or even how your spending habits might be influenced by what you see on social media.
That's true. It's so easy to just get caught up in those social currents, right?
Yeah. And this principle plays out throughout history. Clear talks about a group of smokers in Turkey.
Yeah, so a lot of them started smoking because all their friends smoked.
Oh,
It was
wow.
like a social ritual.
Peer pressure at its worst, right?
It is. Makes you wonder who you should be hanging out with.
Yeah, it definitely highlights the importance of surrounding yourself with people that, like, support your values and goals.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is that some of those smokers, they were able to quit by, like, changing how they viewed it. Like, they saw quitting as, like, freeing themselves
Okay. Yeah.
instead of seeing it as, like, some kind of deprivation.
So it's not just the environment, it's also your mindset.
Exactly. It's like this powerful combination. So we've talked about making good habits attractive, but what about making them easy? You know, life gets busy. Even with the best of intentions, it's really easy to let those good habits slip.
That's like my problem. Like, I'm great at starting new things, but keeping them going when the motivation starts to fade, that's when it gets hard.
Yeah, that's why he talks about the 2-minute rule,
Okay.
which is like making that starting point so easy, it's almost impossible to say no.
Okay, so instead of trying to run 5 miles, I might just commit to putting on my shoes and going for a quick jog around the block.
Exactly. Or if you want to write a novel, just start by writing like one paragraph a day. The whole point is to remove that resistance, you know, those mental barriers that stop us from even getting started,
Right.
you know?
It's tricking your brain into thinking it's not a big deal.
Exactly. I can do this.
Right.
Yeah. And then once that initial behavior becomes a habit, then you can gradually scale it up. And that's what he calls habit shaping.
Okay, so it's like building momentum.
Yeah.
You know, starting with a small snowball, and then it rolls down the hill and becomes an avalanche.
I like that analogy. Yeah. And speaking of momentum, another important aspect of all of this is making those good habits satisfying.
So that goes back to the dopamine hit.
Yes. We're more likely to repeat a behavior when it's rewarding.
Right.
And the problem is that our brains are wired for instant gratification.
Right, which is a problem because so many good habits have delayed benefits.
Right. So we have to figure out how to bridge that gap. We have to make those good habits feel good right now,
Hmm.
even if that ultimate payoff is down the road.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we do that? Do we just give ourselves a cookie every time we do something good?
Well, external rewards, those can be helpful, but Clear really emphasizes the importance of those intrinsic rewards, like the rewards that are coming from the activity itself.
So in the case of, like, the morning walk, it's not about getting that smoothie afterward. It's about the feeling I get when I'm walking.
Exactly. And you can enhance those by like shifting your mindset.
Oh, right.
So instead of thinking, I have to go to the gym, think I get to move my body, I get to improve my health.
Changing those have-tos into get-tos.
Yeah.
It really does change the feeling, doesn't it?
It really does. It's about finding the joy in that process, not just that end result. And then another technique he talks about is habit stacking.
Habit stacking. What's that?
So you're basically linking a new habit to an existing one.
Okay.
So for example, let's say you want to start meditating every morning.
Right.
You could stack that on top of brushing your teeth.
Oh, so after I brush my teeth, I sit down and meditate for a few minutes.
Exactly. And then if you do that over and over again, it just becomes part of your routine.
So it's like building a bridge from something you already do to this new thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can even do that with multiple habits.
Okay.
And it creates this like chain of positive behaviors.
Like a domino effect.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah. And then to really solidify those habits, he recommends tracking your habits.
Oh, I love this because I love checklists and crossing things off. But, like, why does habit tracking actually help?
Well, it gives you this visual representation of your progress, which can be really motivating.
Yeah.
You see all those check marks and you think, I'm actually doing this.
Right.
Plus, it helps you to see patterns.
Okay.
Like, when are you successful? When are you not?
It's turning like those abstract goals into concrete actions.
Exactly. And he says just keep it simple. You don't need some fancy app. You can just use a calendar or a
Like,
notebook.
so I just mark off each day I do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a visual reminder of your commitment. And then speaking of staying committed, let's talk about accountability.
All right, accountability. Everyone always says it's important, but it's hard to actually do it.
Yeah, it can be, but it's super effective. Having someone to answer to, someone who is invested in your success, that can be a real motivator.
So it's not just about willpower. It's about like external support.
Exactly. And Clear actually gives this really inspiring example of this guy named Brian Harris who wanted to lose weight.
Oh, okay. What did he do? Did he join like a weight loss group?
He did something even more intense. He created this habit contract with his wife and his trainer.
Oh, a contract. Wow.
Yeah, he outlined like his specific goals,
Okay.
how many carbs and protein and stuff he could have, and then the consequences if he failed. So like if he didn't hit his goals, he had to pay his trainer. If he didn't weigh himself, he had to pay his wife.
Wow. High stakes.
It sounds extreme, but it worked. Having that pressure really helped him stay focused.
That's amazing. It's like when people make those financial commitments when they're trying to quit smoking or something.
Right, exactly. You're basically using loss aversion.
Yeah.
We hate losing things more than we like gaining things.
That's so interesting. So it's not just about the rewards, it's also about the fear of losing something.
It is. It can be a really big motivator. Of course, not everyone needs to have a contract.
Yeah.
Sometimes just having that accountability partner, a friend or a family member is enough.
Yeah, just someone to check in with.
Right.
Share your struggles.
Exactly. Someone to keep you on track. And then another cool concept he talks about is the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I saw that on the outline. It's about finding that sweet spot, right? Not too easy, not too hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It basically says that humans are the most motivated when we're working on things that are right on the edge of our abilities.
Right.
If it's too easy, we get bored. If it's too hard, we just give up.
Yeah.
But when you find that sweet spot, that's when you hit that flow state.
Ah, flow state.
Yeah.
That's like that magical feeling when you're totally absorbed and time just flies by.
Exactly. That perfect balance of challenge and skill.
This makes me think about learning new things. If I'm struggling too much, I get frustrated and quit.
Yeah.
But if it's too easy, then I just lose interest. It's that in-between zone where you actually learn.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to keep challenging yourself, to keep pushing the boundaries, to stay motivated and engaged.
But isn't there a risk of burning out if you're always pushing yourself?
There is. So it's important to find that balance, listen to your body, know when to push and know when to rest.
It's about finding that sustainable pace where you're making progress without burning yourself out.
Exactly. And then another key aspect is incorporating something called variable rewards.
Variable rewards. Okay.
Yeah.
What are those?
Think about like slot machines. They're so addictive because you never know when you're going to hit the jackpot.
This is a surprise, right?
The surprise, that element of surprise,
Right.
it really taps into our dopamine systems.
Okay, so how can we apply that to our habit building?
So one way is to just switch things up every once in a while.
Okay.
So like if you always run the same route, try exploring a new trail. If you're always cooking the same meals, try a new recipe.
Right. It's keeping things fresh and interesting.
Exactly. You can also use variable rewards like to celebrate your progress. So like maybe you treat yourself to a movie after you hit a certain milestone, or you buy yourself that new book after you've been sticking to your reading habit.
Yeah, I like that. It's like giving yourself a little bonus. Now, we've talked a lot about making those good habits stick, but what about those days when you just don't feel like doing it?
Yes, we all have those days.
Yeah.
And that's where the distinction between like the professionals and the amateurs comes in.
Okay, I'm ready. What's the secret?
So professionals, they stick to the schedule. Amateurs, they let life get in the way.
So it's about showing up even when you don't want to.
Exactly. Think about all the best athletes or writers or musicians. They all understand that. Like, success isn't just about talent, it's about discipline.
So even on those days when I would rather stay in bed, I should just lace up my shoes and go for that walk.
Yes. Those are the days that really count. The days that test your commitment. And you never regret a workout, but you will regret skipping one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's showing up for yourself, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And on those days, just remember your why. Why are you doing this?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So even when motivation is low, we can rely on discipline and purpose to keep us moving.
Exactly. And then speaking of keeping things moving, let's talk about continuous improvement.
Okay. So we've built our habits.
Mm.
We're showing up consistently. What's the next level?
Well, some habits, like brushing your teeth, can just stay on autopilot. But other habits, like your work habits, or if you're doing creative work, those require continuous improvement.
So it's not just about doing the habit. It's about getting better at it.
Think about like elite athletes and their coaches.
Right.
They're always analyzing their performance. They're always trying to find ways to improve.
So they're always going for that extra 1%.
Yeah, trying to refine their technique.
Right.
And that applies to any habit you're trying to build.
So like, if I'm trying to get better at writing, I might set aside some time each week to look back at my work and see where I could improve.
Exactly. Just incorporating some reflection and review into your routine.
That's such good advice. It's about turning those habits into opportunities to grow, you know. But there's something we haven't really discussed, and it's this idea of the downside of identity. Clearworks has this really interesting point about it.
Ah, yes, the shadow side.
Right.
Yeah, so like while our identity can be a powerful force, it can also be a limiting factor.
Okay. Explain this. How could our identity hold us back?
Well, as we develop like this sense of self, we kind of cling to those beliefs, even if those beliefs aren't really helping us anymore.
So it's like we get attached to a certain image of ourselves.
Exactly. So like someone who sees themselves as a non-runner might have a hard time picking up running,
Yeah.
even if they understand the benefits. It's like their self-perception is holding them back.
We're trapped in our own stories.
We are, yeah. And to overcome this, we have to be willing to challenge those stories, and embrace new ones that support our desired habits.
So if I always tell myself I'm not a morning person, I might have to change that belief if I want to start working out in the morning.
Exactly. You're creating this new identity that's aligned with your goals.
That's so cool. Like we can redefine ourselves, like shed those limiting beliefs and become this new version of ourselves.
And that's where it gets exciting, when we can let go of those old stories and we adopt this growth mindset, it opens up a world of potential.
Yeah. This has been such a good conversation. I mean, we've covered so much, everything from the power of those tiny gains to the habit loop to environment design to the Goldilocks rule. I feel like I have this whole new toolkit.
It's been great talking about this with you. And remember, this is an ongoing process.
Right.
There are going to be twists and turns.
Yeah, it's about embracing the journey and celebrating the small victories.
Yeah.
And, learning from the setbacks, never giving up.
Beautifully said. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are tons of resources out there. Books, articles, podcasts, communities.
Yeah. And speaking of books, this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, is a great place to start. It really is full of insights and practical advice.
It's a book that can really change your life.
All right. So before we let you go, what is the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Oh, that's a great question. If I had to pick just one thing, it would be to focus on building those systems, not just chasing the goals.
That's so good. It's
Yeah.
about creating that framework, that consistent progress, and not putting so much pressure on ourselves.
Exactly. When you have a good system, the results, they kind of just take care of themselves.
And building systems isn't just scheduling your day.
Right.
It's about changing your environment, your habits, and your identity, like making them all work together.
Exactly. Creating this ecosystem of success where everything's working together.
Right. This has really highlighted how much our habits, our environment, and who we are, how much it's all connected.
It really is fascinating. It's like we're weaving a tapestry,
Yeah.
Each habit we create, it's like a thread in that tapestry.
But if we're making conscious choices about those habits, we can create a tapestry that reflects our values, what we want, who we are.
Beautifully said. Now, I think it's important to talk about something we often overlook, and that's making bad habits unsatisfying.
Okay. Let's talk about the dark side of habits. We've talked about making good habits attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Right.
But how do we deal with those bad habits that are just so hard to break?
One thing you can do is increase the friction associated with those behaviors.
So like making it harder to do those bad habits, less appealing.
Exactly. And there's this great example. Clear talks about the invention of the cash register.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So back in the 1800s, this saloon owner, John Patterson, he was dealing with employees stealing.
Right.
And he couldn't stop it. He tried all these different things. Nothing was working. And then he saw this ad for this new invention. It was called Ritty's Incorruptible Cashier.
It sounds promising.
It was the first cash register.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it would lock the cash and receipts inside after every transaction.
So no one can steal.
Yeah, basically, it worked. Employee theft was gone, and the business went from losing money to making a profit.
It's a great story.
Hmm.
It shows that if you make bad habits impossible, or at least really hard, it works.
It does. And we can do this in our own lives. If you're trying to get off social media, you can delete the apps or use a website blocker. Or if you're trying to eat less junk food, just don't keep it in the house.
Right. Just take away the temptation.
Yeah, make it inconvenient.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And we can use technology to help us too. We can use it to automate good habits and make bad habits harder to do.
So we're using technology to our advantage.
Exactly. We can set up automatic bill payments. We can use fitness trackers. You can set reminders to take breaks.
I love those reminders to stretch.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can do the opposite too, right? If you're on social media too much, you can use an app to limit how much time you're spending on there.
Right. Set some boundaries with those apps.
Exactly. So we talked about making bad habits less satisfying, but then there's also making those good habits more satisfying.
Right. I think this is where that instant gratification thing comes in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our brains want that immediate reward.
Right.
So we have to figure out how to make those good habits feel good now.
Right. So it's not just about the long term, it's about enjoying the process.
Exactly. One way to do this is to focus on the intrinsic rewards of the habit.
The intrinsic rewards, yeah.
What are those?
So those are the rewards that come from within, like that sense of accomplishment or that calm you feel after meditating. Right. So instead of focusing on getting something, you're enjoying the feeling of doing the habit.
Precisely. And Clear suggests that you can make those intrinsic rewards even better
Okay.
by shifting your mindset.
All right. How do we do that?
So he says we should think about our habits like they're opportunities
Okay.
instead of obligations.
Okay. So instead of saying, "Ooh, I have to go to the gym," I would think, "I get to move my body today."
Yes, exactly. You're changing the way you see it, focusing on the positive.
It's turning have-tos into want-tos.
Yes, and that can make a huge difference in how much you enjoy it. And then he also mentions habit stacking.
We talked about that earlier.
We did,
Yeah.
yeah. It's linking your new habit to one you already have,
Right.
creating that chain of behaviors.
Yeah.
So if you want to start meditating, do it after you brush your teeth.
Right. Yeah, because that's something I already do.
It is, and if you do it enough, it just becomes part of your routine.
That feels so much easier than just trying to, like, create this whole new thing.
It is, and then you can do that with multiple habits,
Yeah.
create that dominant effect.
I like that.
Yeah. Now, one thing that really spoke to me was how important it is to start small. It's easy to get excited, right?
Yeah.
And set these huge goals, and then we get discouraged.
Right. Because we fail.
Right. Clear says you should focus on just the first 2 minutes of the new habit.
The 2-minute rule.
The 2-minute rule, it's a great one. You're making those first steps really easy.
So if I want to start running, I might just put on my shoes and walk around the block.
Exactly. And then, once that's a habit, I can increase the distance, maybe start jogging a little.
And then I'm a runner.
Exactly. You just gradually shape that habit.
That makes it less scary.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked a lot about how habits work,
Yeah.
but there's also this, like, emotional component.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Change is hard. There will be times you want to quit.
Right.
And Clear knows this. He gives some great advice for dealing with that.
Okay. Let's talk about resilience. What does he say?
He says, be kind to yourself.
Self-compassion. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about treating yourself with kindness,
Yeah.
especially when you mess up.
Right. Because we all mess up. It's about learning from it and not beating yourself up about it.
Exactly. And you can do this by changing how you talk to yourself.
Okay.
Instead of being negative, be encouraging.
Be your own best friend.
Yes. And that will really help you stay motivated.
Yeah, I like that. Create that positive inner environment.
Exactly. And Clear also says, focus on the process. Don't worry so much about the outcome.
So find the joy in the journey.
Yes. That's a really important shift to make. If you're only focused on the outcome, you'll get discouraged because it feels like you're always falling short.
Right, because you haven't reached the goal yet.
Yeah. But when you shift to focusing on the process, you can actually be satisfied along the way.
So if I'm trying to write a book, I shouldn't worry about how many words I write each day. I should just enjoy writing.
Exactly. Savor the creativity. Enjoy bringing your ideas to life.
I love that. Fall in love with the process.
Yeah. And that's how you stay motivated. And then, when things get tough, remember your why.
The power of purpose.
Yes. Why are you doing this? If
Yeah.
you connect your habits to your values, you tap into this, like, deeper motivation.
You're making your habits a part of who you are.
Exactly. And that's what keeps
It's a part of who you are.
Exactly. And that's what keeps you going. This has been a really great discussion. We've talked about the habit loop, motivation, resilience,
I
self-compassion.
feel like a new person,
Mm.
ready to take on the world.
Me too. And remember, these ideas can be used for anything.
Yeah.
Personal goals, work, relationships.
It's about taking control of your life and designing it the way you want.
Beautifully said. Before we finish, I want to share one more thing. Clear talks about identity-based habits.
Okay, what are those?
So it means that your habits aren't just about what you do, it's about who you believe you are.
So it's not just going for a run, it's seeing yourself as a runner.
Yes, exactly. And the more you feel like that, the more likely you are to stick with it.
Right, because your actions are matching your image of yourself.
Exactly. And Clear suggests that you can build those identity-based habits by focusing on the kind of person you want to be.
Okay, so it's not just about writing every day, it's about seeing myself as a writer.
Exactly. You're someone who creates, who uses their words.
That's a powerful idea. It's not just going through the motions, it's about who you are.
Exactly. And that makes all the difference.
Wow, this has been awesome. We learned so much about how habits work, the whole tiny gains thing, systems, even those identity-based habits.
Totally. And remember, it's a journey. There are going to be ups and downs.
For sure. It's about enjoying the process, those little wins,
Mm.
and learning when we mess up, and
That's a
never
good-
giving up.
Perfectly said. And hey, remember, you don't have to do it alone.
Right, right. There's so much out there like books, articles, even podcasts, and communities online.
Exactly. There's so many people out there trying to build better habits. So yeah, find those resources, find your people.
Speaking of resources, Atomic Habits, you know the book we're talking about, that's a great place to start.
It really is. It's packed with insights.
Okay. So before we let you go, what's the one thing, like the biggest takeaway that you hope our listeners got from all of this?
Oh, good question. If I had to pick just one, it would be build the systems. Don't just chase the goals.
That's so good. It's about setting yourself up for success, not just focusing on the end result.
Exactly. The results will come if you have the right systems.
And building systems, it's not just like writing a to-do list.
No, 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 no.
It's about changing your environment, your habits, who you believe you are.
Totally. It's like creating this whole ecosystem.
Right. We've seen how much our habits, our environment, and our identity, they're all tied together.
They really are. Like threads in a tapestry.
And if we're mindful of the habits we build, we create a tapestry that reflects who we are.
Beautifully put. Okay, one last thought before we go. Clear talks about making bad habits unsatisfying.
Okay. Yeah. We talked about making good habits attractive and
Mhm.
easy, but what about those bad ones? How do we kick those?
One thing you can do is make those bad habits harder to do.
So like making it inconvenient to do them.
Exactly. And there's this cool story about, the invention of the cash register.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
So back in the 1800s, there was the saloon owner, John Patterson, right?
Okay.
And his employees were stealing from him.
Oh, no.
And he tried everything to stop it, but nothing worked. And then he saw this ad for something called Ritty's Incorruptible Cashier.
Sounds legit.
It was the first cash register ever.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it basically locked the money inside after every sale.
That's so smart.
It worked, theft stopped, and the saloon started making money.
That's a great story. It shows how powerful it is to just make those bad habits really hard to do.
Totally. And we can do that in our own lives. Delete those social media apps if you're on them too much. Don't buy junk food if you're trying to eat healthy.
Yeah. Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And technology can help. Automate your good habits. Use apps to block the bad stuff.
Right. Technology can be our friend.
It can. You can use apps to block websites, set up those automatic bill payments, use a fitness tracker to keep you moving.
Those are great ideas. So make those good habits easy and those bad habits hard.
Yeah. Now, what about making good habits more satisfying? That's important too.
Right. That's where the instant gratification thing comes in.
Yes. We want the reward now. So how do we get that with good habits?
Well, how do we do that?
Focus on the intrinsic rewards of the habit. Like enjoy the feeling of doing it.
So, like, I'm not running for the medal at the end. I'm running because I love how I feel when I run.
Exactly. Clear says you can make those intrinsic rewards even stronger.
Okay, how?
Think of your habits as opportunities, not things you have to do. Like instead of, ugh, I have to work out, it's, I get to move my body today.
Love that. It's all about how we look at things.
It really is. And remember, habit stacking.
Yeah, yeah. Linking the new habit to something we already do.
It's so effective. Like meditating after you brush your teeth, do it long enough and it's just part of your routine.
So much easier than trying to start something totally new.
It is. Now, one thing I really took away from the book is start small.
Yeah, don't try to do too much at once.
Exactly. Don't get overwhelmed. Clear says to focus on the first 2 minutes.
The 2-minute rule.
Yes. Make those first steps super easy.
So to start running, I just put on my shoes and walk around the block.
Exactly. And then you build from there, gradually increase the distance, the time.
Makes it less intimidating.
Right.
Now, we've talked a lot about the how-to, but there's that emotional side too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Change is hard. There can be days when you want to quit.
And Clear knows this. He's got some great advice for staying strong.
Okay, spill the beans. How do we stay resilient?
Be kind to yourself.
Self-compassion.
Yes. It's okay to mess up. Learn from it. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Be your own cheerleader.
Exactly. Change that negative self-talk. Be encouraging. And remember to focus on the process, not just the end result.
Enjoy the journey.
Yes. Don't get so fixated on the goal that you miss the good stuff along the way.
So if I want to write a book, just enjoy writing.
Exactly. Enjoy the process. Don't worry about the word count or the deadline.
Love it. And when things get tough, remember your why.
Yes. Your purpose. That's what will keep you going.
This has been amazing. We covered so much. Habit loops, motivation, resilience, self-compassion. I feel ready to go build some new habits.
That's what we like to hear. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about consistency, small changes, big results.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of atomic habits.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you learned something new and that you're excited to try out some of these ideas. Until next time, keep diving deep